Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, how to use marketing automation to turn your B2B sales sieve into a funnel. My name is Mario Kiriakou and I'll be leading you through today's presentation. So let's begin. Before I get too deep into the presentation, I wanted to just cover off a couple of things around if you're unsure why you should be considering funnel optimization, funnel nurturing for a B2B organization, some of the reasons why you should be considering this. Some of the standard reasons around are within B2B, especially, sales cycles can be quite long. Unlike with e-commerce, where email communication or channel and outbound marketing can expect to convert a percentage into a paying client, with a B2B audience, there's an expectation and a realization that a large part of the audience that you engage with won't be looking to purchase your product or services anytime soon. And funnel optimization is a way of dealing with, say, the 98% of your prospect database who are not looking to buy right now. People who are engaging with your business, unlike perhaps traditionally, are looking to do a lot of upfront research before they engage with sales. So it may be a combination of evaluating your service offering against the competitors, but the idea being that by time they put their hands up to speak to a salesperson, they're actually quite well informed around the general market and services that you're offering. And now they're looking to have a deeper conversation. So they're not starting from a cold start. And of course, funnel nurturing provides you with an opportunity to best position your business during that research phase. And unless you work within an extremely niche market, the prospects and audience you're likely to engage with are also being targeted by many of your competitors. So there's an expectation that your buyers who are looking to purchase your services are going to be saturated with sales messages. So the question is, how can you be more relevant? How can you cut through the noise so that your company stands out as someone who's providing the right information at the right time based on an understanding of what this prospect really wants from you as an organization, and also around the services that you provide. Marketing invests an awful lot of money in outbound marketing, in optimizing digital channels, in generating traffic, in trying to convert that into a ever-expanding database, which is fine, but growing your database isn't the measure of success for you as a marketing department. The question is, if you are growing that database, how are you best using that? And of course, funnel nurturing plays a large part around the best way to engage with an ever-growing marketing database. And also a realization that every prospect who's dealing with you as an organization is at a different stage of their journey with you as an organization, whether this is the first time they visited your site or downloaded some content, or perhaps they've been negotiating with your sales team for the last 6 to 9 months. The realization is that you have a large database, but everyone within that is not just an email address. Each one of those people are at a different stage of their journey with you. And the question is, are we able to capture that? Are we able to segment based on that? And also, are we able to treat people differently based on where they are within your overall marketing and sales pipeline? But why bother? So I pull out the obligatory stats, but this one's quite interesting. This is a report from Salesforce. And it was interesting to see that marketers within B2B, some of their, I suppose, top 3 organizational goals over the next couple of quarters, and qualified lead pipeline comes out on top. And again, this is something that comes out whenever we speak to B2B marketers. How do we generate better qualified leads? How do we better nurture our pipeline? So a common cry amongst salespeople is we need more leads, but also need better quality leads. Now, from a marketing department's perspective, how can we leverage digital channels so that we can better nurture what we are capturing and what we have, so that we can then deliver that better qualified pipeline for our sales teams, which ultimately within a B2B organization is what marketing is truly measured against, is how much value do we generate for a sales department. Now, before we go too deep into the presentation, I want to come up, just voice a couple of challenges that we see come up time and time again. And I'll go through these to see whether any of these resonate with you as the audience out there. So, one, you've invested significantly in marketing technologies but haven't used their full capability. This is quite common across all types of marketing technologies, but within tools such as traditional marketing automation platforms, our experience has been they tend to be used as a, I suppose, glorified batch and blast system, which is obviously quite expensive. There are far simpler tools out there. So the question is, what is the full capabilities of the technology you have, and actually have you mapped them against what you want to do as a team department, and actually have you closed the gap between what the platforms are capable for and what you're actually using for? So two, data. This is one probably you've heard millions of times before. Is your data held amongst a bunch of different systems? So within B2B, some of the obvious ones that we see come up time and time again, you have data on your website, you have social data, you have data in a separate email tool, and then obviously you have your hard sales data, which tends to be held within places like CRM. For some of the people we've spoken to within these, I suppose, B2B sectors, customer portals come up again. It's quite common in fact places like wealth and asset management. But basically the nuts and bolts of it are, do you have all your data spread out a bunch of different systems? If the answer is yes, of course that is a challenge around looking to be quite optimal and efficient in terms of nurturing your pipeline and your funnel, because you just don't have access to that data on your customers. It's held in a bunch of different silos. So three, KPIs. Do you actually have KPIs? And if you do they tend to be soft metrics like we're looking to measure bounce rate or dwell time? Those are fine, but when we're looking to create a funnel optimization program, we need to have something a little bit more granular, a little bit more detailed, but also something harder that aligns nearer to what sales wants around generating qualified leads. And we'll cover that later on. Fourthly, have you spoken about doing some far more advanced marketing techniques? So a couple of ones which we're talking about today: personalization and marketing automation. Have you talked about it but have yet to do any of it? Or if you've done any of it, such as perhaps marketing automation, is it simple event flows? Event A followed by event B followed by event C, triggered email, triggered email, triggered email, nothing more advanced than that. Fifth, feedback from your sales teams are a request for more and better qualified leads. This one is a challenge for everyone we've spoken to recently. And finally, you mainly focus your nurturing efforts on batch and blast type communication. So we're going to be talking about omni-channel marketing automation. I'm talking about what it is, what it's not, because it feeds directly into, in our opinion, the best way of optimizing and nurturing your marketing and sales funnel. What it's not, well, it's not batch and blast email. Now, there's a place for batch and blast email. We're not looking to have every form of communication segmented and targeted. Batch and blast has its purpose, but for us, omnichannel automation is how do we elevate that and get to the next stage of far more targeted segmentation. So not just uploading a list and then sending a single communication to your entire contact database. Another misnomer that comes up often when we talk about omni-channel automation is that automation is not just email. So traditionally, marketing automation has been seen as a way of sending email communication, but also providing automated flows that will send out automated triggered emails to your audience based on whatever is the flow you've created. Now, email is one channel, but for us, it's not the only channel. So when we're thinking about funnel optimization, it's about what are the other major channels that you have as a business and how you pull that into the mix, so we can look to do targeted communication across multiple channels. So for us in B2B, it tends to be email and web. So that's the two channels we're going to be talking about today. And the reason is to look at it from your prospect customers' perspective. When they're engaging with you, they tend to engage across a bunch of different channels. Obviously, social comes into this as well. But if we look at just two straight channels, websites, so that's desktop, mobile, and email. The reason I say these tend to be within B2B the main communication channels that you have as an organization. And the reason why we say that an optimal approach to funnel nurturing should incorporate both channels is because, looking at it from your prospect's perspective, that they are engaging with you on your website, so they're looking at content, we're collecting data around how they engage, how they view, how they interact with you, and secondly, as a marketing team, you tend to be using the email channel as the main outbound form of communication. Now, what we are proposing as I suppose, best practice is to collect data on how your prospects interact with you across both web and email, and then looking to build a automation approach that incorporates delivering personalized messages on site, but also very targeted, segmented one-to-one communications via email. So therefore, if we know that X is doing Y on the website, let's combine that into your email communication plans, because what they view on site informs what type of content they would like to view or read via email. So let's look at a couple of examples of what omnichannel automation is and could look like. So looking at it from the customer's perspective. So a very simple example, customer, she visits your website for the first time. She comes back several months later, returns, browses, looks at more content, and perhaps this time completes a form. She leaves, returns at another point, views some more content. Perhaps further down the line, once her research phase is out of the way, she decides that perhaps your company is the one that she would like to speak to regarding your services, and initiates a conversation with sales by raising her hand and asking to receive a phone call or speak to someone via email. And then eventually, hopefully, as we all do, she converts, or her company converts to a paid customer, and now she's working with your accounts team. Now, from an omni-channel automation perspective, what could that experience look like? Well, we obviously capture a bunch of different things at each of these points. So from her first visit, we can recognize this is from a large company, what her company is based on the IP address. So we've already identified who she is. When she next returns to the website, we can look to build a flow that allows us to then automatically personalize her next visit based on her type of company. So for example, if she comes from a manufacturer, perhaps we want to have some case studies or some messaging around why your organization delivers services to manufacturing, or some examples of the type of work you've delivered for clients within that sector. Based on that information, we want to then deliver outbound communication via email based on the type of content that she's viewing. So when she views content, we want that to trigger a certain type of email. We know she's completed a form, so we know she's gone from an unknown visitor to a known visitor, but now we want to trigger automatic emails. And because we want to align this with sales, we want to then pull this data into her CRM contact card within whatever CRM system you're using, whether that's Dynamics or Salesforce or any other alternative for CRM. Reason why? Because we want to keep your sales team abreast of how your prospective customer is interacting with you as a business and what type of content is of interest. Therefore, when she does reach out to speak to someone, that person can have a more informed conversation around some of the needs that she possibly might have based on the type of content that she's reviewing and researching. But why bother? Why does omnichannel automation matter? Now, this is a quite a well-known B2B funnel from Forrester Research, but it just serves to illustrate that customer journeys are complex. So the traditional approach to using automation, it's been traditionally around email, but it's also been quite a linear approach to setting up an automation plan, and it's basically send email day one, 7 days later, send a follow-up, 14 days later, send a follow-up. And that's obviously quite a linear experience. The reality is that your customers will engage with you in a non-linear fashion. So we want to build an approach to nurturing your funnel based on collecting data around your prospects' interests and then allowing that to then trigger one-to-one communication, whether via web or email, based on their known inputs around what is of interest to them as individuals. And some of this stuff you can do pretty easy and pretty quickly, because as an organization, you're already collecting a bunch of different things around how your prospective and also your existing customers are interacting with you as a business. So some of the obvious ones are collecting, tracking company IP, the location of your audience, where they are in the world, things like time lapse between first looking at a specific piece of content and returning to look at more content, the type of content that's been consumed across your site, or also across the type of email communication they're looking at reading. If they've triggered any specific goals, number of visits, having basic lead scoring, etc. So there's already a bunch of things which you are capturing. The question is, how then we build that into an automation flow and an approach to funnel optimization that allows us to then trigger some positive action based on what we know about that individual. So a couple of examples, quite basic examples, but just to try to illustrate what is possible you could do. So a common one is around content we think you will like. So your prospects or customers are interacting with you. The question always comes up when we speak to B2B marketers as well, what type of content should we be looking to retarget them with? So the obvious one is, well, is the content we think this prospect will like based on what we know about them. So to go through the steps, it's about setting up a process where we're collecting that data around your content, so that content is tagged correctly. So therefore we have a process in place that support you in terms of if you're producing loads of blogs or thought leadership, we can tag each of those content items. So therefore those tags will be pulled into the automation plan in order to tell us what could be of interest to this individual. So we know they're looking at thought leadership around perhaps export finance. Therefore we know or make a build a plan based on, okay, what other content do we have that goes to the next level around export finance, and that's fed into the recommendations engine of, I suppose, your automation technology. And then you then leverage that to then personalize the next visit around that specific content item, but then also to send a triggered email. A more complex scenario is around, can we create an approach to nurturing a prospect where they're based in the funnel? So to run through this, the reason why it's more complex is because it's not something you probably look to do straight away, because it requires an element of system integration. But in order to determine where someone is within the funnel, we need access to CRM data, because CRM data tends to be the place where sales records how they're interacting with prospects, but also existing customers. So that will tell us whether they are at the opportunity stage, or whether you've closed them as a prospect and now they're an existing customer. If, for example, they're at the opportunity stage, we will then perhaps want to create a scenario where their next visit is personalized around trust content, around why your organization is someone they should look to work with. And then again, then building that also into within your email outbound communication to send further content around. We know you are not an existing customer. We know you're doing research. Now we know what we want to do is build trust around why us as a business is a company that you should look to partner with. But where do you begin? It's quite a tricky thing to decide, because looking at your, I suppose, your database, there's many things you could look to do. One thing we would recommend is building out a map. So almost like a bunch of ideas. Now, the one on screen is an example, and obviously every company is different. But the idea being to sit down as a marketing team and flesh out how you collect data, but also the type of activities that might be relevant to individuals, and then use that as a starting point. And in effect, we build out a big map, on tools such as Excel, and then that's kind of our starting point for building out what a journey could look like based on the type of audience you deal with, the type of data you're collecting, but also the type of next step action that might be relevant, and then using that to build out the experience map, which then will be mapped to your marketing technology tools, and then we can start creating things like the HTML emails and on-site like website banners and on-site messaging that trigger personalization scenarios. But it's a challenge to do this unless you centralize your data. Now we don't envisage clients will go and look to integrate all your different data silos. There's obviously a bunch of politics around trying to do some of this, but ultimately you want to start connecting the dots between at least some of your marketing technologies. Now, the obvious ones do tend to be website, email, and CRM. Obviously, you can have a bunch of other digital channels, but at the very minimum, you like to connect those three. Why? Because ultimately you want to measure the impact that this type of approach to funnel optimization has on driving sales. To do that, the best way to do that is to integrate your web and email data with CRM, and vice versa. We want to integrate web and email because we want to collect as much data and as much information around how your prospects are interacting with you via digital channels, so then we could then build out a relevant approach to automation. Now, every business is different, but when we've spoken to B2B organizations in the past, Google Analytics always tends to be used as the main analytics tool, but it's rarely, if ever, and I've never seen it, is the single source of truth about how successful your business is. Within B2B companies, it tends to be the CRM as the single source of truth on how your business is performing, because that tends to be where your pipeline sales data is recorded and also reported on. So the quick question is how you pull your marketing data from digital channels, website, email, social, etc., and then build that into your CRM in order to then pre-populate contact cards with relevant information around how your prospects are interacting with you, but also so we can collect those triggers. But then you can then have the opportunity to build out dashboards in order to report against the impact that your marketing is having on what you like it to show is what marketing does, generates X for sales. But what does a typical technology-driven sales funnel look like? I won't go through every part of this. I'll cover off a couple of the main strands. So incoming channels and data points. These are a combination of how people interact with you on your website, email, social, whether you have any apps. But these are the digital elements that your prospect and customer base will consume content. They will perform actions against. The output of this is data integrity. Are we collecting this in such a way that we can actually analyze and understand this data, but extract insight, which allows us to then build a automation program based on an understanding of how our customers are interacting with us. Campaign creative. Marketing can't survive or do anything around content. So automation plans, whether that's combining just email or just web or combining both in terms of delivering one-to-one communication, requires an understanding of what type of content is going to be relevant, what type of messaging do we need to build into our different channels. So then we could then send out personalized email communication, but also then trigger on-site personalization scenarios. And the big ones around sales lead enrichment. Marketing departments, this is something which they would like to do, but for reasons they tend not to get round to, normally because of disconnect between marketing and sales. But how can we enrich sales lead data with timely marketing data around how prospects are actually interacting with us, so we could then turn around to the business and answer that perennial question of what did marketing do to drive value for sales and for the growth of the company. Form capture. This is one I like talking about, actually, because for most organizations we talk to, this is one that resonates quite well. So question to ask yourself: when you have forms on your website, if you actually have forms to capture data, do you ask for everything up front? So do you have like the form of death where you ask everything your sales team would ever want? Because if you ask sales what you should collect from prospects, they will tell you, basically ask everything they want. Of course, that's great, but forms are the same with any form of, I suppose, basket for e-commerce, similar to e-commerce companies, that there's a conversion and dropout factor. The more information you ask for, the greater the likelihood that a higher percentage of your target audience will drop out and not complete the form. So it's equivalent of a basket dropout. So how do we optimize that? Because if we're not capturing that data around prospects, by converting them from a non-known visitor to a known visitor via a form completion, then what we really have is basically just website data, which is fine in terms of personalization, but for, in my opinion, for B2B organization to do funnel nurturing properly, we need to convert those web visitors to known visitors. So we need to capture at a minimum like an email address. So then we can then take that conversation offline and nurture them via email and keep bringing them back to the business so that when they are ready to buy, they will think of us and come back to us. So in terms of forms, are you looking to do things like progressive form completion? So you have a basic lead form. So instead of doing what sales wants and having a form that has every single field, the form of death, have a basic lead form. But then use that, then pre-populate it on the next visit, so they don't actually have to then complete it again in order to download a white paper or some of your thought leadership, but then ask for more information. So perhaps next time we also want to ask for telephone or company, but progressively on each visit, asking a little bit more information. I mean, the one on the screen is an example, but the idea being we can then use this data to then enrich sales leads so that when we are reporting and building that data into CRM contact cards and sending out triggered emails to sales teams about how their prospects are interacting with you as a brand, each time we're giving them a little bit more information around their prospects, and not just what type of content are they consuming, but also we're asking a little bit more each time, but we're doing it in such a way that it's quite gentle and we're not being too intrusive. I mentioned at the start of the presentation around, is this a familiar challenge? Do you have KPIs, if any, and are they soft metrics? Because we want to build harder metrics so we can measure the impact across the entire funnel. The reason being, we need to understand what impact this approach has to generating qualified leads and opportunities. So everyone's KPIs and metric points should be different for every organization, but looking to sit down with you as an organization, think about what it is we want to measure at each part of the funnel. And also asking yourselves, do you actually have a way of differentiating different types of leads? So for example, do you have an understanding of a lead versus a marketing qualified lead versus a sales qualified lead versus an opportunity? Is your funnel set up in that way so we're moving people from one stage to another and then putting KPIs around each of those stages? In other words, we're moving someone from a marketing qualified lead to a point where they're now ready to speak to sales and having that as our KPI. But again, it will depend on each organization because every company is slightly different. But this bringing us towards the end of the presentation. So I just want to just run a couple of things which I would like you guys all to consider if you're looking to apply this process yourself. So firstly, ask yourself, what type of experience do you want your prospects to have from you as a business and also from your digital channels? Ask yourself, what data are you currently collecting on your customers, and what data would you like to collect on your customers, because that will allow you to close the gap between what you currently have and what you need to put in place to capture as much detailed information around your clients as possible. Ask yourself, where is your data held, and do you actually have access to that at the moment? How is your data connected? How is it held together, or is it completely siloed? And finally, because we want to show the impact of why marketing is awesome and why marketing drives value for sales, ask yourself, what type of reports do your sales teams want and need, but also what does marketing want in order to further optimize your marketing and digital approach. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. So thank you for listening. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. If anyone has a question, feel free to just pop it into the toolbar on the right-hand side of the screen. Okie doke. Well, it doesn't look like we had any questions, so you get a bit more of your day back. But thank you very much for listening. Just to let everyone know that today's session was recorded and this will be sent out within a couple of days. So thank you for listening and hope you have a nice day.